What is a warrior? I asked myself. Wait just a second. This view is all the, okay, there it is. Is it her? Could it be her? Is it hers? And we're talking women. Mm-hmm. Is it her?
Oh, I know
is
who
it
that
her?
is.
Or could it be her? Mm. Well, I looked it up. Oh, it could be her or her. So I looked up the word warrior, and this is what I got. One who is engaged aggressively or energetically in an activity cause a conflict. A person who has shown great vigor, courage, or aggressiveness. Then I asked myself, what about justice? Justice is a principle of moral rightness and decency. And for the next few minutes, I will be talking to you about some of the African women warriors who were very passionate about the things that they did, are passionate about their country, passionate about their people. And we're going to do Queen Hatshepsut.
Very good.
Cleopatra the 7th. I didn't know it was a Cleopatra the 5th, 4th, and all of that either. And we're going to do Harriet Tubman, Ida B. Wells Barnett. We're going to talk about Nanny of the Maroons. Does everybody know that? I had never heard of her till I found out. Asata Shakur, didn't know her either. And I'm hoping I pronounced this right. Sinait Belair. Anybody ever heard of her?
No.
No. What about Nanny of the Maroons? I know y'all heard of her. Yes. Okay, good. So we're gonna do some of those. Those are the ones we're gonna do. First, we're gonna talk about Queen Hatshepsut. Now, I went online to learn how to say her name, and it's Hatshepsut. And I was told that you're supposed to say it sharply so it can roll off. And she was reigned from 1507 to 1458 BCE. She's noted for her foremost a noble woman, the first female ruler of Kemet to reign as a male, both a king and a queen. Now, the way she did that was she fought her way to power and held the throne for 33 years. Her father, now, this is another thing that I found. I found this name spelled two different ways, one with the O and one with the U. So I use the U. So I'm hoping I pronounce it correctly. Is it Thutmose? Thutmose, did I say it right? Okay. Thutmose the first was her father, and he was called the conqueror of the known world. Now, Thutmose the third was her stepson and her husband. And he could have been possibly her killer. And we're going to talk about that a little bit further. Now, I really didn't want to do that. Let me go previous. Now, I want to tell you the story. First of all, Hatshepsut became the chief. Her father, first of all, he was stricken with paralysis. And Hatshepsut became the chief aide to him. In time, he entrusted her with the management of the kingdom and made her co-ruler. That's how she really first started out. Then her father called all of the nobles together. And by the way, her last name used to be Hatshepsutah, and it was not Hatshepsut. But she changed her name once she changed herself to a male. And he called them all together and he said, from now on out, she's going to be in charge, and I want you to listen to whatever she says. Now, anyone that goes with her, you got my blessing. I will adore you. But those that go against her, basically, he told them that he would speak evil against them and they would just surely die. That's what he said. So anyway, she took over and she did a lot of things for the kingdom. But anyway, because she took over, her brothers, who were Thutmose II and Thutmose III also, her brother, the second, he was really angry about the whole thing. So anyway, he started doing things to sort of get her out of the way. But anyway, when her father died, she married her brother. He married her brother because her brother was of underage, and because he was underage, she could actually be him, take over his. He could be in charge. She could be in charge and do whatever and do his job as the king. So the first thing she did was, because everybody was against her and everything, the first thing she did was she put up some, they call them obelisks. I looked that up too. And obelisks are things that they put up, and it's pretty, they put them up so that they can show their power, basically. And it also has a relationship to the sun god. Now, she put up 2 obelisks. And the reason she put up 2 obelisks was because the church, the Amen-Ra church, was bothering her. She made them taller than the temple of Amen-Ra, because the priest in Amen-Ra did not want her to rule. So her obelisks, what she did was she took 2 of them. They were basically, it took 900 men to transport them down the Nile. And they were very tall and very heavy. They were taller than the Amen-Ra temple. And she also put what we call electrum on top of them. And on the top of these, the electrum makes it shine. And anytime that anybody looked out over toward Amen-Ra, the temple, they would see this. They would see that, and it was shining in their faces, and it was very brilliant. And but she did that on purpose, of course. And then basically, I tell you, it was a lot. She put up a lot of monuments. She put up a lot of obelisks. She put up a lot of and the monuments. When she put up the monuments, she put the monuments up as her, but she made herself a man, as a man. And she said she announced, because they were bothering her a lot, she made an announcement that she was a male and not a female. And she also claimed that her dad was not Thutmose the first, but Amen-Ra. And that Amen-Ra came into her mother's bedroom and had perfume, and all she smelled was perfume, and that she got pregnant, and she actually had her, and she was God sent, basically. And God told her, she said, God said, I'm to rule. But anyway, so they said you can also go in Deir el-Bahara, which is where you can find her tomb, and you can actually see the pictures on the wall where she has it drawn that she was conceived by Amen-Ra. Her mom, she was born of Amen-Ra. They said that is actually on her walls right now today. So basically, they said that she held her own until she died. And when she died, they suspected her brother killed her, by the way. They suspect that he actually poisoned her. And some of the things that she did was she did expeditions of the land, and she actually got more of the land for her people. And they said that she was the dearest to live in memory of mankind. And she was the first one that actually became a king, but was a woman. Now, I'm going to talk about Cleopatra. Cleopatra was the last ruler of Egypt before the province of Rome. And she was a Greek and of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Now, this woman was something else. Everybody remembers her as fooling around with Caesar and Mark Antony. I just realized that his name was Antony and not Anthony. And a lot of people usually call him Anthony, but I realized he was Antony. And Cleopatra was actually a Greek, like you said. And when she was 18 years old, her father died, leaving her the throne. And that's just how early that she started. And because of Egyptian tradition, they said that she needed a male consort to reign. So what did she do? She ceremonially married her brother, Ptolemy the 13th. And I believe he was 12 years old when she married him. Now, because she ruled for centuries, because of the Macedonian Greek superiority had ruled Egypt for centuries, they did not like Cleopatra. The thing about Cleopatra was that Cleopatra knew a lot of languages. And one of the languages she knew, she was fluent in Egyptian and eloquent in her native Greek. And she was proficient in a lot of other languages as well. So she was able to negotiate and talk to diplomats and get things done without an interpreter. And they really definitely didn't like that. So they started giving her a hard time about the things she was doing. And she had a lot of power. In spite of her many achievements, her court wasn't pleased with her because she did make peace and she did have things done, get things done. In spite of her achievements, the court was not pleased with her. And the chief advisor, along with another chief, Theodorus and General Achilles, I think his name is Achilles, they overthrew her and placed Ptolemy the eighth, the one that she married, on the throne, believing that he was going to be easier for him to control his sister. So Cleopatra grabbed her sister, her name is Arsinoe, and fled to the ball for safety. So Cleopatra went there, and Cleopatra's brother they were fighting with Caesar. Of course, Cleopatra and Caesar had an affair, and Caesar left his wife for Cleopatra, one of his wives, which her name was Octavia. And Octavia was the sister of Octavian. And he was Octavian. I'll tell you, it was a lot. Octavian was really upset about him doing his sister, because he divorced his sister and married Cleopatra, even though he had two other wives. He married Cleopatra, and Cleopatra gave him a son named, they call him Caesar. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. So anyway, Caesar got killed. He got killed and she fled. And when she fled, she ran into Mark Antony. She saw him. And what she did in order to meet him was she took herself and she rolled herself in a rug, and she had herself delivered to him. And when she stepped out of the rug, she was half naked. And she and Antony got together that night, and the next morning, the king, Pompey, he was very, very upset about it. Well, her brother was very upset about it. But in the end, to let you know, Cleopatra, she died when she was 39 years old. She ruled for 22 years. And they thought maybe perhaps, well, what happened was, it was like to me, it was like a Romeo and Juliet in a sense, because Cleopatra actually killed herself. And she killed herself by a snake. she had a snake. She went inside of the tomb, and she had one of her servants bring the snake in, and she killed herself. But before that, Anthony killed himself, thinking that she was dead, and so he stabbed himself, and then they lowered him into where she was in her tomb, actually, because that's where she went in there. She went in there, and that's when she got bit by the snake. Went in her tomb, and they lowered him in the window, and he died in her arms. And then later, like I said, she got bit by a snake, and she got bit by a snake and died. Now, most of these women had to fight the family in order to do what they had to do, and especially Cleopatra, and it was definitely a lot of cutthroat. Let's talk about Harriet Tubman, the first woman in history to lead a military raid. Harriet Tubman was born in Dorchester County, Maryland. Her name was Arminita Ross. Her mother and her father were enslaved, and they were owned by Anthony Thomas. They were brought together when Mary and Anthony got married. Ben and Harriet, which were her mother and father, they had 9 children. Arminta inherited the state of enslavement person from her mother, but she was put to work around the age of 5 when she was young. Now, when she was young, her enslaver's son sold 3 of the Arminta sisters to distant plantations, breaking up the family. Arminta suffered violence at the hands of her enslaver and other white people in her community. Her body was scarred from beatings, and when she was a teenager, the overseer hit her on the head, and when he hit her on the head with a 2-pound weight, she started to suffer from seizures and severe headaches and narcolepsy for the rest of her life. She finally married John Tubman, he was a free Black man. The marriage didn't change her legal status, so she remained enslaved. Around the time of her marriage, that's when she took a name Harriet. And in 1849, she learned that her enslaver was planning to sell her. So she decided that she wasn't going to wait around for it. So she decided that she was going to leave. So she was aided by abolitionists who belonged to the Underground Railroad. When she reached Philadelphia in the free state of Pennsylvania, she found a job and she started a new life. Now, Harriet was there, and she was really missing home. So she said, I really want all my family to be here. So she tried to buy land, and so that she can put all her family on it. She did buy some land. So anyway, Harriet went back. She found out that her sister was going to be sold. So she went back and freed her sister. Now, Harriet was a tough egg because Harriet carried a gun wherever she went. And she also threatened to kill anybody who wanted to turn back that started out with her too. And she also would give the babies tonic and put them in a deep sleep so that they wouldn't make any noise when they were traveling during the nighttime. It is estimated that she actually saved about 70 to 80 people, including her elderly parents. Now, people start hearing about her. Of course, they changed her name to Moses. They were calling her Moses. And she was definitely a factor of a lot of people being free. Now, after a while, because everybody was being free and they were going up to Philadelphia, after a while, the laws of Philadelphia were to where the slaves would be taken back if they were caught there. So she started actually going a little bit further and taking the slaves to Canada. When the Civil War broke out, Harriet focused her efforts on supporting the Union Army. She was assigned to the 2nd South Carolina Colored Troop under Colonel James Montgomery. She was given a job as a cook and a nurse. That was because she was a woman, because of her race and her sex. But Harriet soon performed more military duties that she actually became a spy. She didn't abandon her efforts to the Confederate lines together to help enslave people. She helped enslave people who escaped during the war to find shelter and safety. But despite of all of her work, Harriet was paid very little. She supplemented actually supplemented her income by selling baked goods to the Union soldiers. She was the first woman to lead the Union troops into battle. And based on the information that she gathered, the raid that she did was very successful. It was called the Combahee River, down by the Combahee River. They destroyed the Confederate Army, basically. They liberated 750 people from slavery in a single night during that battle. Harriet remained politically active after the war, and she joined Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton in their campaign for women's rights. She attended the founding meeting of the National Association of Colored Women in 1896, where she met Ida B. Wells. Yet Harriet never had enough money to live comfortably. In 1898, she petitioned the government for a military pension, but they wouldn't give it to her. Instead, they increased her widow's pension because her husband died, from $8 to $20 a month. She never stopped working to improve her community. And she actually opened the Tubman Home for the Aged and Indigent Negroes, a charity that she helped would carry her on her work after her death. She died there in 1913, surrounded by friends. From my understanding, there's still something in her name, like a home, as far as I know, with Harriet Tubman's name on it. Sojourner Truth, she was an evangelist, abolitionist, and women's rights activist, and an author. She was born with the last name, her name was Isabella Bumfree, and she was in 1797. She was born to enslaved parents, James and Elizabeth Bumfree, in New York. And around age 9, she was sold at an auction to John Neely for $100 along with a flock of sheep. After gaining her freedom, Truth started preaching about abolitionism and equal rights for all. She became known as a speech with the famous refrain, "Ain't I a woman?" Ain't I a woman? Look at me, look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it and bear the lashes well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen most all sold off to slavery. And when I cried out with my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman? It was hard for me to read that. And ain't I a woman, basically. That was the turning point for her, as far as the women's rights. Now, around 1815, she met a man named Robert from a neighboring farm, and she fell in love with him. And they forbade her and him to get together. Well, one day he sneaked off and he got with her and he got caught, and they beat him almost to death. And she never saw him again, ever. Then she met Catton. Was it Catton? One day Robert sneaked over, yeah. And then she met Thomas. His name was Thomas. And she bore him 5 children. James, her firstborn, who died in childhood, and there was Diana. Diana was the result of the rape by her slave owner, John Dumont, and Peter, and then there was Elizabeth and Sophia, all born after she and Thomas united. Now, she was caught up in the Emancipation Proclamation part, and she ended up being a free woman. And that meant that in the state of New York, she was a free woman. They were free. And so one day her son got sold, and she challenged the court to return her son back, Peter. And she won, and she ended up with her son. They tried to say to her that that he was a slave, and she said, no, he wasn't, not according to your law. What she did was she used the law back, their laws back on them, so that she can get her son back. She also worked along with Frederick Douglass, but she and Frederick didn't get along because he thought he was better than the women. Then there's Ida B. Wells. I told you she and Ida B. Wells got together. She knew Ida B. Now, Ida B. Wells Barnett was an American investigative journalist, educator, and early leader in the civil rights movement. She was the founder of the National Association for Advancement of Colored People. All the course of her life, she was dedicated to combating prejudice and violence in the fight for African American equality, especially that of women. Wells argumentably became the most famous Black woman in the United States. She grew up in Mississippi, and she was the oldest of 8 kids. Her parents were James and Elizabeth Wells, and then she learned how to read after slavery. And their parents made sure that all their kids could read. James had been trained as a carpenter, and he was able to support his family without becoming a sharecropper, because most of us became a sharecropper after slavery. So that, and that basically was a form of slavery by being a sharecropper. He was self-sufficient, determined, and proud. And when his former owner's wife asked him to visit, he refused to visit. And in 1867, when Black men in Mississippi could vote for this first time, his white employer told him to vote for the Democrats, but he was against it. So she had all of that fight in her from the beginning. In 1882, she moved away with her sister to Memphis to live with an aunt. Her brother found work as a carpenter's apprenticeship. For a long time, Wells continued her education at Fisk University in Nashville. It was at Shaw University that Wells received her early schooling. However, at the age of 16, she had to drop out because tragedy struck her family. Both her parents and one of her siblings died of the yellow fever, leaving Wells to care for the other siblings. She's ever resourceful. She convinced a nearby county school administrator that she was 18 and landed a job as a teacher. She continued in her own studies, taught Sunday school, and did the family's cooking, washing, and ironing. 3 years later, in 1881, Ida and her 2 youngest sisters moved 50 miles away to Memphis, Tennessee to live with their aunt, where she continued to teach. When she was 22, she bought a first-class ticket on a train. And the train was from Memphis to Holly Springs. She had done it before, but for some reason, this time was not a good time to do it. So she took a seat in the ladies' car, something she had did for like 2 years. This time, the conductor told her to move to the back where the Black people were. And she refused. And when he tried to drag her from her seat, she bit him. The 2 men helped him forcibly remove her as white passengers applauded. She was removed from the train and she sued the railroad for damages and won. But her triumph was short-lived as the railroad won on the appeal. Jim Crow was becoming the law of the land. In 1886, when she was 24, Ida lost her teaching job after she criticized conditions in the Memphis school system. She had written a few articles for the newspaper and decided to turn journalism full-time. 3 years later, she bought a share in the first female-owned and was the first female-owned co-owner. She bought a share in the Memphis Free Speech and Highlight. That was a newspaper, a Black newspaper in the US. She began writing articles and editorials under the name Iola. Now, her friend Thomas Moses, a Memphis letter carrier and a grocer, was lynched by a mob after a confrontation with another white grocer. Ida was very upset about it, and she wrote an editorial about it. She started writing a lot of editorials about it, and they actually went and burned down her newspaper, where she was the newspaper, a newspaper store. By 1890s, lynching was a terrorist campaign to solidify white control of the South. Victims were often Black men accused of raping white women. Ida doubted these accusations, noted that often the charge was made after a man had been hanged or burned or shot or beaten. She thought it more likely that victims had been in a consensual relationship with a white woman, or like her friend Thomas, were businessmen who threatened rival whites and had no connection to whites at all. She wrote a series of anti-lynching editorials. Ida documented over 728 lynching cases that occurred between 1884 and 1892, using research by the Chicago Tribune. Within months of her friend's murder, she wrote a collection of articles under the Southern Horrors. She focused less on grisly details and more on the false accusations made against the victims. Her goal was to arouse the consciousness of America, and she became America's best known crusader against lynching. 6 days, let's see, Wells Barnes published an impassioned editorial in the Free Speech newspaper on May 21st, 1892 regarding recent lynchings. 6 days later, while Wells Barnett was attending the conference in New York City, a mob responded to her article, and I told you, they burned down her press and threatened her life if she ever returned back to Memphis. She decided to remain in New York until 1893, and she settled in Chicago, Illinois. She began publishing her research in a pamphlet titled Southern Horrors, Lynch Laws, and all of its phases. The pamphlet is an indictment of lynching perpetrated against African Americans in the years following the Civil War. Southern Horrors was a culmination of Wells Barnett's intensive investigative work and provided eyewitness accounts and statistics for lynching reports in newspapers across the land. She published in 1895, Wells Barnes published the Red Record, the first documented statistical report on lynching. Now the only thing it did was it lowered the numbers of people that were being lynched. But of course they kept on lynching. That was Ida B. She also went and talked to and written letters to at least 6 presidents. She and Woodrow Wilson she had a call for Woodrow Wilson to put an end to discriminatory hiring practices for government jobs. Of course, he said he would, but he didn't. Now, she and William Monroe Trotter, who was also an editor of the newspaper, went to Boston, Massachusetts. Went to see the president of the United States together so they could talk to him about some accommodations. Also, she was a women's suffragist. Either I would go with you. What happened was she went out and the women were gathering together to go for women's suffrage. And the white women said, well, if the Black women are coming, if the Negro women are coming, we're not going to do it. So she said, either I go with you or not at all. She said, I'm not taking this stand because I personally risk for recognition. I'm doing it for the future benefit of my whole race. So Ida B. Wells did go. And of course, they agreed for the Black women, I mean, for the African-American women to actually march with them, but they wanted them to march in the back. But you know, Ida B was not with that. So Ida B made her way up to the front and she marched in the front of that march. Then there's Nanny of the Maroons. She was a celebrated Jamaican war hero. She was a practitioner of Obeah. Have you ever heard of Obeah? Okay.
Yes, it's referred to as Obeah.
Obeah, that's how they pronounce it. Obeah. Obeah is a system of spiritual healing and justice-making practices developed among enslaved West African in the West Indies. Obeah is difficult to define, is not single. It's a unified set of practices. The word Obeah was historically not often used to describe one's own practice. Now, Nanny of the Maroons, you ever heard of Nanny Town?
Sugar D, I think we had a question. Did someone have a question?
Yes, the dates of her life. You have 1989 to 1755.
You know that's not right. Let me see. Let's see the dates of her life. Do I have it written down? You're right, I do have that, don't I? That's not right. I don't have it on my paper. But it's not, it definitely is not 1989, that's for sure. Thank you for pointing that out.
Mm-hmm. It may have been 1689.
It may have been. It may have been. I don't have it written on here either. Anyway, she believed in that and she did a lot of that. Now, she ended up, what happened, look at this thing here. She was actually from Ghana, and she was actually captured and brought over to Jamaica from Ghana, and she and her brothers, her brothers also, they decided that they were not going to be slaves, so they organized a raid, and they went up. What they did was first they went up into the mountains, and they established a place called Nanny Town. Like I said, they came from Ghana, and Nanny Town were these areas here. And the areas were so dense with trees and things like that, that they could not, people couldn't get to them at all. But anyway, her brothers, they fought. Let's see, it said that they fought the British government. After the wars of the British government, they signed a treaty. But they did a lot of fighting with the British government, and she served as a physical and spiritual healer in her community and master of a guerrilla warfare, and was trained, and she trained the Maroon troops, and they all got together and they fought against slavery to free the slaves. During a period of 30 years, she was credited with freeing more than 1,000 slaves and helped them resettle in the Maroon community. Captain William Cuffy, have y'all ever heard of him?
Yes.
Okay, I've tried to find a picture of him, I couldn't find one. He was credited to have killing Nanny in the 1933 during one of many battles. The war itself lasted from 1720 until a truce was declared in 1739. Cujo, one of Nanny's brothers and a leader during the Maroon War, was a driving force behind the treaty. After Nanny's death, many of the Wynwood Maroons moved across the island into a more sparsely inhabited western or leeward side of Jamaica. Nanny Town was eventually captured by the British and destroyed in 1734. There are remnants of Nanny Town. If you go visit to Jamaica, you can see some of the things left over from Nanny Town. They also have her legacy living on, as she's the earliest leader of the resistance in the Americas. Now, one thing that happened with her was they put Queen Nanny on the $500 bill in Jamaica. They're using it right to this day. However, right now they're voting and they're getting ready to change their banknotes. And this right here is Queen Nanny and Samuel Sharp. And I don't know who Samuel Sharp is, but apparently he was someone great in Jamaica as well. Has anyone ever heard of Samuel Sharp? No. Well, anyway, so she is remembered and her legacy lives on, and she freed a lot of people from slavery. Now, I didn't know this lady either. Asata Shakur, and I'm saying it right? Civil rights activist and a member of the Black Panther Party. She was born Joanne Deborah Byron. She also got married, and her name was also Joanne Chisholm. She was a former member of the Black Liberation Army and was convicted in first-degree murder of the state trooper, Werner Forrester, during a shootout on the New Jersey Turnpike in 1973. Shakur is wanted by the FBI, and there's a $2 million reward for her apprehension. Born in Flushing, Queens, she grew up in New York City and Wilmington, North Carolina. After she ran away from home several times, her aunt, who would later act as one of her lawyers, took her in. She became involved in political activism at Borough of Manhattan Community College and City College of New York. After graduation, she began using the name Asata Shakur, and briefly joined the Black Panther Party. She then joined the BLA, a loose-knit offshoot of the Black Panthers, and engaged in an armed struggle against the US government, though tactics such as robbing banks and killing police and officers and dealers. Between 1971 and 1973, she was charged with several crimes and was the subject of a multi-state manhunt. In May 1973, Shakur was arrested after being wounded in a shootout on the New Jersey Turnpike. Also involved in the shootout were New Jersey state troopers, Warren Forrester and James Harper, and BLA members, Sadiata Akoli and Zaid Malik Shakur. State Trooper Harper was wounded. Zaid Shakur was killed. State Trooper Forrester was killed. Between 1973 and 1977, Shakur was charged with the murder, attempted murder, armed robbery, bank robbery, and kidnapping in relation to the shootout and 6 other incidents. She was acquitted on 3 of the charges and 3 were dismissed. In 1977, she was convicted of the murder of State Trooper Robert Forrester and 7 other felonies related to the 1973 shootout. Her defense had argued medical evidence suggested her innocence since her arm was damaged in the shootout. While serving a life sentence for murder, Shakur escaped in 1979 with assistance from the BLA and members of the May 19th Communist Organization from Clinton Correctional Facility for Women in Union Township, New Jersey. Now it's called the Etna Mahan Correctional Facility for Women. She surfaced in Cuba in 1989, where she was granted political asylum. Shakur has lived in Cuba since, despite US government efforts to have her return. She has been on the FBI most wanted terrorist list since 2013 as Joanne Deborah Chesmard, and was the first woman to be added to this list. She was a bad mama, wasn't she? She was something. And she, like I said, she was part of the Black Panther Party. She moved to Oakland, California, where she joined it, but she left the party because she didn't like the macho behavior of believing that the BPP members and leaders lacked knowledge and understanding of the United States Black history. That was something surprising. And
let's not write that sister off. It's not that she was bad. She still is. She's still
yeah, she is. She is bad. I mean, but he was a bad mama jam. I was just saying back then. And she also joined the Black Liberation Army. Now, these I never heard of them, but but I'm learning so much about it, about everything. Inspired by the Viet Cong and the Algerian independence fighters of the Battle of Algeria. I'm going to look into that a little bit more because I want to know more about the Black Liberation Army. And like I said, she was the first woman to be placed on the most wanted list, the FBI most wanted list.
I think that was Angela Davis. Was the first.
Huh?
I think Angela Davis was the first woman on the FBI list.
Was she?
That's the
most wanted? I don't know. Everywhere I read, it says she became the first one to be placed on FBI most wanted, but I don't know. But I'll look into it. I'm doing Angela too.
Sister Sugar D, can you, Brother Bill has his hand up.
Okay, Brother Bill.
I was only going to say that anyone can be charged with anything. That case was not proven.
Right.
So we can imagine who might charge whom with whatever. At least we're not mourning her assassination by the gang in blue.
Right. Yeah, because it did say that they found that, that they believe those charges were not real, that they were false as they always are. Santi Belair, the Tigress of Haiti. She was born at French in Verdes. Y'all know what a French is. Have you ever heard of that? It's a free person of color. Frenchies were allowed to obtain some education and own land, former French legal terms denoting a freedman or emancipated slave, but was a term used to refer pejoratively to mulattoes. Did I say mulattoes right? Is that how you pronounce that? It is used in the English language to describe a social class of freedmen in Saint Domingue and other slave-holding French territories who held legal rights. Now, she was part of Toussaint Louverture's army. And of course, he was the Haitian general and the most prominent leader of the Haitian Revolution. She was part of the Haitian Revolution, and she married, let me see, it says she had married, she was part of Haitian, she was, now, let's see, she got married to a guy, and they were all part of the Haitian Revolution. And they got caught. And when they got caught, they were put to death. He was shot, put before a shooting. He was shot, and they were going to behead her. But she said, no, don't behead me. I want to be shot too. So they shot her as well. They put her before what they call a firing squad. And but she chose the muzzle she wanted to be shot with and everything. But she's considered one of the heroes of the Haitian Revolution. And in 2004, she was featured on the 10 gourd banknote of the Haiti gourd for the Bicentennial of Haiti commemorative series. And this is her. And when they got ready to kill her, as they were shooting her, she was saying this, and I guess it was in French, but it meant long live freedom and down with slavery. And that was the end of my presentation.
Wow. Wow.
And
beautiful.
Thank you. I don't think I gave it to what I wanted to give it. I am so tired, and I apologize.
No, don't apologize.
Yeah.
No,
you gave us plenty. You gave us plenty.
Yeah, but I had plenty. It was so much that I wanted to say.
Well, think about this. Each one that you presented is worth like one program. You know,
it is.
You could spend an hour and a half on Hatshepsut or Cleopatra or I mean Ida B. Wells. Most people think it was Rosa Parks that was forced off of public transportation, but it was her, and she actually won the case, but then it was overturned in the Supreme Court.
Right.
I mean, just each one, and the last one I was not familiar with. I did not know who that was, and so I'm sure Brother Bobbin Daly is familiar with that last one. Is there anything that you would like to add on that, Bobbin Daly? I'm sorry I'm doing this, but I'm considering you the Haitian expert. You know, so anything Haiti, I'm just thinking it's you.
I would like to add something after him.
By any means, but I have studied a little bit of the history of Haiti, and particularly in relation to Haitian artists who illustrate Haitian history. And so I'm much more familiar with that as opposed to the details of the political history. But, you know, I am very appreciative of this presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I tell you, it's so much. I learned a lot. And I thank you, Minister Imhotep, for giving me this assignment. And I hope in the future you'll give me other assignments.
You will be. And you know what? I appreciate your passion on this, and really you gobbled a chunk of history. You took us from the Nile Valley all the way to Haiti. So we appreciate that. Brother Kalahari, I think, had a comment or a question. Go ahead.
Yes.
Just about, excuse me, Ida B. Wells. In a book, and I can't think of the woman's name, but anyway, she said that Ida B. Wells said that she had done more for Black lynchings than the NAACP.
Right. I agree.
Yeah, I could believe that. I have a question, Sugar D. Did you
try and answer.
Find any information on Sojourner Truth and the name change?
Yes.
How that came about?
Yes. She had what? See, I left out a lot of stuff. What happened was she visited this family, and she went to this church, and she had, I don't know if it was the Holy Ghost or whatever happened to her, but after she had that experience, that spiritual experience, she changed her name. She said God told her to go around and help people and do what she does. She was slated for that. She said God told her that. So that's when she changed her name to Sojourner Truth.
Wow. Oh,
yeah.
That's very interesting. Thank you.
And what language did she speak?
She spoke Dutch.
Uh-huh.
She spoke Dutch. See, I left so much out, you guys.
No. See, we're getting
asking questions.
We're getting it now. You left open questions. You know, that's what you did.
Yeah.
I see what you're doing. This is the way you teachers do. I'm on to you. All right. Are there any other questions that you'd like to ask? Any other?
Guys, it was so much to learn, and so I'm telling you, I'm just full. I'm full right now. I am so full, and I'm so thankful. And these are some of the books I used. I had this book, and I had this book, and I had this book. This is the book that I used to teach my babies about the heroes and stuff. And of course, the jewel of all jewels was this book. I mean, I bought this book, came in like the next day, and I was like, okay, let me get into this. And I'm gonna get the second volume as well. But you guys, I mean, and I took copious notes, and I was but I enjoyed it. It was not a burden. It was not a burden. It was
when Chancellor Williams wrote that book, I think was that the one?
Yes.
Chancellor Williams.
Yes. L.A. Rogers wrote this book.
L.A.
J.A.
Rogers.
J.A. Rogers.
J.A. Rogers.
Dr. Clark was on Tony Brown. I think it was the 60s. I'm not sure, but Dr. Clark held up books by famous Black people, but there were 2 volume books instead of that one.
Oh, okay. And then I have these that I teach the kids from, and they came in handy. Let me show you how it goes. And this is all women in here, all women. And they had, and that's how I learned about the nanny. And that's how, and then they even had her in it, Asante. And then this lady right here is something else. Her name is Mary Church Terrell. Y'all heard of her?
Yeah.
Oh man, she's
heard
off
of her.
the chain. And guess what? Garvey's wives, both of them are in there. Nefertiti is in there. Now, have you ever heard of Queen Candace of Kush?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I've heard of her.
I thought she was interesting too with the one eye. and Carlotta Lukumi. This whole thing is full of women, and I got one that's full of men. That was another resource, and of course, the internet was a resource. And but I enjoyed it, and I appreciate everyone that came to listen, and hopefully you took some nuggets away.
Yep, and we have more questions.
Okay, go ahead.
So, I wanted to say that this book, it's not showing up because of my background, but it's Black Women in Antiquity. It's part of the Journal of African Civilization by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. And in that book, he has an article by, I believe, Dr. Clark. So John Heinrich Clark has an article, and it's called African Warrior Queens. So since you're on that theme, I think you might enjoy it.
I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah.
So what was the name of that book you just said?
It's called Black Women in Antiquity.
Okay.
And it's edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, and they're articles from various scholars.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so you'll
Black Women in Antiquity.
And that's for anybody that is interested.
Right.
That is a very good research. Actually, any of the Journal of African Civilizations are valuable. I remember Dr. Van Sertima discussing, and somebody he was talking about a European publisher, and he wanted to get some of his books, but he had what's that called? Cognitive dissonance. He couldn't put it in his mind that it was African civilizations. He kept saying cultures, and he kept using some other word or term. He just couldn't come to grips with African civilizations. But so any of the Journal of African Civilizations is great. Van Sertima edited most of them, but there are a couple that are edited by Runoko Rashidi.
Oh, okay. And who did you say wrote the African Warrior Queens?
John Heinrich Clark. It's an article in the Black Women of Antiquity.
Oh, okay.
I was curious about Asata Shakur, who I believe is still in Cuba. And did you come across any current information on her? I mean, after the death of Fidel and some of the changes. Yeah. So
and I'm gonna tell you, and I'll tell you the truth. I didn't look, but I thought about it after I was saying, I asked Minister Imhotep, I said, she's still in Cuba, and he said, yeah. And I said, I should have looked to see.
The Cuban government had they stated that they are not going to, turn her over.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was, that was one of their stance. That was something that Trump was trying to.
That's right. That's right.
He was trying to get them to turn over, but they.
What?
Yeah,
but they
it sure was.
Stood firm and said, no, we're not releasing this person. So.
Right.
So the Cubans deserve a lot of credit for that.
Yes. Yes. I wanted to say about the Maroons. The Maroons fought they first had the Spanish. They were fighting the Spanish, and they defeated the Spanish, and then they fought the British to a standstill.
Right.
And one of the main leaders was this man by the name of Cujo.
Right. Cujo was her brother.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, that's what I said. I called her name.
I'm sorry, I missed that part.
Cujo was her brother.
Affair.
Yeah, Ghana is very prominent in Jamaica, and those were the leaders of those. I'm sorry, I missed that part. Thank you for correcting me. Are there any other comments, questions, thoughts on what's presented? Go ahead, Bamidele.
Yes, I would. One of the things, speaking of Maroons, it's very important for us to appreciate the Jamaican Maroons within a cross-cultural context of understanding Maroon cultures around the Americas. And so it's, I think that us understanding and appreciating Nanny helps us to understand and appreciate what occurred in Haiti as well, with the different different people who escaped into the heavily forested mountainous areas and sought some sense of freedom there. And in fact, there is going to be a conference. The Haitian Studies Association is having a conference in October at Howard University. And it's on the theme of Maroon or Marronage. So if anyone is interested, you can go on the website of the Haitian Studies Association. There is also a book called, there is an anthology on Maroon cultures as well in the Americas, edited by, I think, Richard Price. A European American author, but most of the authors of those studies are European Americans, but it is worth checking out nevertheless as a way of investigating that area.
Well, that's another one of our great presenters. He's going to come to us in June, on June 15th, and he's going to be talking about African family structure. And that's going to be a great one. And then he's going to come in a little later, I believe in August. I'm not sure of the date, but to talk about Haiti, Haitian Revolution, and things related to that. Are there any other questions? Anyone else?
Yeah, I had read a book that I was reading a newspaper, and they started talking about Cuba, and can't think of the title, but the narrator said that in the book, one of the prisoners was narrating, and he said that Castro had killed 500,000 people in Cuba. And anybody that disagreed with him, you didn't do that or talk anything about, say anything negative about, the administration. So I'm just wondering, anybody, does anybody have any comment on that? Is it true? I'm just telling you what I read.
You know what? Fidel Castro has been accused of doing a lot of things. And, a lot of that is propaganda, because he did not succumb to U.S. forces. He remained independent. I know that a lot of just look at this. So when the people in Angola were fighting against the Portuguese, who sent troops and military aid and medical aid to them? It was Fidel Castro. Mm-hmm. And I remember one of my old professors who's also going to be part of our Black Knowledge Matters in a couple of weeks, Dr. Obata, and he was saying that Fidel Castro has survived many assassination attempts. And one of the reasons that he credited his survival is that he was surrounded by Santeria. Is it Santeria in Cuba, Bob and Daly?
Yeah, Santeria or either Regla Lucumi. It's the same thing.
Lucumi. He was surrounded by, those were his advisors, because people were trying to poison him, and so he was steeped in African culture. And we're going to be talking about Malcolm X next week, and there's pictures of Malcolm with Fidel. When he came to the United States, he came and there's a picture of Malcolm in a car with Kwame Nkrumah and Fidel Castro.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. So, I'm not saying that Fidel Castro was 100% good. I don't know that much, but I just know there's certain things. And just one more thing. We at WOSE were treated to the Minister of Information of Grenada. This is before they were invaded. And he came to us twice and he said, we're going to be invaded. He said, because the Cubans are helping us build an airstrip, because what they wanted to do was to have an airstrip built for tourism. And so they approached the United States. The United States kept saying, okay, we're going to do a feasibility study, and they kept putting them off. And they reached out to the Cubans, and the Cubans sent workers. I mean, you can look around the world in struggles against oppression. Cubans come out and help the people. So that's all I can. I don't know the ins and outs of Fidel Castro's life, but those are a few things that I've read and confirmed with respect to Fidel Castro.
I saw an African saying that the Russians had helped them fight somebody. I forget who he said. What the Russians did for the Africans was gave the Africans guns to fight with, and that's why the person that was speaking said that they weren't going to go to fight with the Ukrainians. I also saw. I forget where I saw it at, but a guy who worked with the organization that goes to different countries and help people. He was Black, and it was Amy Goodman. He held up a picture, a letter saying that Black people were animals and monkeys and all that type of stuff. I guess we all have seen what they do to Black people there. They do pretty much every place else, but they were, pointing guns at the Africans and getting them off of the trains and all types of stuff like that, which didn't make a whole lot of sense when all of them were just trying to get out of home. You're
talking about Ukraine?
Ukraine, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Well, a friend of mine who's very politically astute is part of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and he had posted something, and I had to reply to him. I said, you know what? Neither one of them is any good. You know what? The Russians did supply arms to people in South Africa, because the United States was for keeping apartheid in place. So yes, they did do that, but neither one of them is any good. Malcolm, and just like what Malcolm said, he was talking about the Republicans and the Democrats. He said one's a political fox, one's a political wolf. Both belong to the dog family. So one acts like he's for you, and then the other one acts like he's not for you. But the truth is that neither one of them are for you. And
sound like Republicans and Democrats to me.
That's what he's talking about. So
exactly.
We have to really look at things through the spectacle. This is a Garvey's term. We need to really look at things through the spectacles of Ethiopia. We need to see how this benefits us, any particular situation. So yes, the people were trying to get out in Ukraine, and they put them in a concentration camp. And right now, we don't know where they are. What happened to those people? Some got to Poland and they jailed them. So we need to recognize who our friends are. And really, sometimes people are just friends for convenience, for political opportunists. So we really need to study and analyze. We can't take anything at face value and say, these people are our friends, these people are not our friends. Individually, you may have friends that are different ethnic groups, and they are your true friends. There's some people that you can have that are your true friends. But as a group, you need to analyze, how that behavior is towards us. And then I'm so, I was down pressed. That's a Rasta term. I was down pressed by the historical tribute, but actually greatly informed by the historical tribute, pointing out the brutality of the French during the Haitian Revolution. So we really need to see. And if you go back, I was just listening today. I was listening to Professor Kaba Kamene, and he was talking about the ASCAC conference in 1987, when 1,000 Black people came to Kemet for a conference, and he was with a Nubian. And they were trying to walk into a hotel, but he said he was talking to this Nubian. His name was Abdullah or maybe Muhammad, I'm not sure. And he said that he turned around. He had walked in a few steps, and he turned around, and the Nubian didn't come into the hotel. And he walked back, and he said, "Hey, what's come on in." And he says, "No, Nubians aren't allowed in the hotel." And he had to go to the person that was stopping, who was a Nubian himself, but he was just following orders. And he had to go to the manager and said, "Hey, if you don't let this man in, I'm going to have 1,000 people that are staying here leave." And so these things are, he said that was 1987. So these things are happening, now.
And the same thing happened when we were, when the National Conference of Artists met in Brazil. We were staying in the Autumn Palace in Bahia. And the brothers and sisters who would accompany us sometimes to the hotel wouldn't come in. Or did not want to come in, or once we were all in, didn't want to get up and get the food that was there, that was part of the hospitality thing. And it's because of the issue of race and caste in these countries that is still observed. So, and this was in the 80s.
Yeah, so then thank you, Brother Bauman Daly. And then Professor Kamene continued. He said that the people in Nubia at the time thought that Black people were still enslaved in the United States. That they were taught that the best person in our history is Abraham Lincoln. So yes. So,
you know, Dr. Clark said we have no friends. He said that a number of years. He said African people just got us. We don't have any friends because we've been deceived and betrayed by so many other groups. And of course, you know, Dr. Clark was always pretty strong and emphatic in his commentary, and he straight up said, "We have no friends."
No, we don't.
I was with Dr. Clark. This was in 1981 in Egypt, and I didn't really know who Dr. Clark. I didn't really know a lot about Dr. Clark back in 1981. That was just a name that I knew was a historian. But the trip that I went on, Dr. Ben was on that trip. Dr. Clark and Leonard Jeffries and other people like that. Astra Kwesi, that was his first trip, and so we were taken to the temple of Aga Khan, and this woman was going on about how great Aga Khan was, and this and that, and Dr. Clark, up until that point, my observation was just a kindly old gentleman, just kind of unassuming, just sitting there, and he let that woman talk. And then he came on and he said, after she was finished, he let her do her whole thing. And then he let her have it. Mm-hmm. He blasted her right then. He said, "You are misleading these people. Aga Khan killed," and he gave the figure of these many Black people, and mm-hmm. I was like, who is this? That was my introduction.
Well, I became acquainted with Dr. Clark around about that time too, but it was during the first ASCAT conference. And of course, he was on that panel too with all the greats, John G. Jackson. Well, I could name them, but all the greats was there. Avin Venerable, Small, Ben Yakanan, Karanga himself, Hamad Mahubuti was there. Oh, just all of the great scholar, Asa, Hilliard, they were all there. And so for my first time, I had a chance to see and hear Dr. Clark. And I was saying, man, he was so eloquent and so well informed. And I'm thinking, well, why haven't I had heard about this guy? Mm-hmm. So that was my first introduction to Dr. Clark during that ASCAT conference.
You know what? Dr. Clark came to McClymonds High School, and he talked for about 2.5 hours. By that time, he had gone completely blind. Mm-hmm. And he sat on that stage and talked for 2.5 hours. Yep. And had this high school auditorium full of African people, African Americans mostly, just captivated. There's a movie. It's called John Heinrich Clark, A Great and Mighty Walk. Mm-hmm. John Heinrich Clark, A Great and Mighty Walk. I don't know if you can get it on YouTube, but you may be able to. I haven't looked for it, but I think that was a movie that was produced by Wesley Snipes.
That's correct.
And Wesley Snipes, his production company was called Amin-Ra Productions. Yes, indeed.
Right too. Yeah.
Sugar D, we got about 4 minutes left. We see what your presentation generated. Do you have any closing remarks before we prepare for our Women of Wosay to come forward?
I just still want to thank everybody for their patience and being here to listen and hoping that you did take away some nuggets. I am so how could I say it? I'm still full. I am so glad that you gave that assignment to me. Even though I feel, we are worst critics, that the way I wanted to do it just didn't come out like I wanted it to, but that's okay. But thank you very much, and thank you for the the knowledge, and thank you for all of that.
So Bill put it in the chat.
That we can get that.
So you can get it. It is on YouTube, John Henry Clark.
All right now.
Walk. So if
thank
you
you,
want
Brother
to find
Bill.
out more information on that, I'm going to give us a little preview for next week. We're the person that we're going to talk about. Let me share my screen as we close out. Thank you again, Sugar D, for such a tremendous effort in putting together this. This is our. This is.
Malcolm X. Malcolm Salam. Big up the X. Salam alaikum. Wear it on your heart and your chest. It's a tribute to Malcolm X. Maccabee and her 16 again. Because of Malcolm X, white men got vexed. Then could have vexed. They didn't want to see black men progress. All along the way, brothers have strayed. And the sisters too. Searching to find the way. How long will it be till my black brothers see there's a hidden brutality? Oh, Jah said, big up the X, big up the X, big up the great.
All right.
All right. Looking forward to that.
We're done with 2 minutes to spare. So
zooped up, man.
One other thing about Malcolm X, he said that progress isn't having a knife stuck in your back and pull it out 3 or 4 inches, or pull it out, 3 or 4 inches instead of the whole knife. He said that progress is having the whole knife pulled out of your back.
And then you have to heal the wound. There is that was the continuation of that quote. So before Spike Lee put out that movie on Malcolm X, it was based upon a documentary on Malcolm X, and it had the most complete footage of Malcolm. It's called The Autobiography of Malcolm X. I think you might be able to get that on YouTube as well. It's a tremendous work. Actually, today, you know what? Coincidentally, I just looked at the date. Today is May 11th. And that was when I saw that movie in 1981, May 11th. And, at the end, Malcolm dies, of course. And when I came out of the movie, somebody told me that Bob Marley had just died. So I felt like Malcolm had died twice. And so, yes.